My name is Matt Rolfe. I'm a hospitality leadership coach. I spent my entire life in hospitality. I kind of found it by mistake. I grew up with a learning disability. So my guidance counselor going into grade 9 said, you're not going to graduate high school. So I ended up finding hospitality. It was the first industry or really leadership where I found where somebody said, I believe in you, and told me what I could do rather than what I couldn't do. And it just became my passion and my love. I moved out of school from working in restaurants to working for major suppliers like Bacardi and Anheuser-Busch. But I found a lot of my clients going bankrupt. And they were not only my clients or partners, they were my friends. I watched them lose their houses and their business. 18 years ago, we brought a company from Australia to North America that helped make restaurants more profitable. What I learned is you're coaching behavior change, not profit management. 9 years ago, I started coaching leaders in the industry. I found there's a gap. There's a lot of operational training, but how do we support people? And not just the people's team, but the actual leader, so they can be the version of themselves to coach their team. And that's what I do all day, every day, working with leaders in their teams.
So you stumbled into this. You found hospitality by accident almost.
I did, yeah. I remember the day the guidance counselor said, you should probably go get alternative employment rather than, what that meant is go get a trade job. And I got a chip on my shoulder at times, I think as some of us do. So at that point, I wanted to prove him wrong, but just found it because somebody looked at me without judgment of how I did in school, of the person that I was, and it's life-changing.
No, that's funny. I was almost the same way. Like I discovered restaurants by accident.
Yeah.
I'm really big into entrepreneurship. Like that was the itch. That was the thing that it took me a while to find it, but it was even if you looked at the video games I was playing as a kid. Yeah. It was Roller Coaster Tycoon, right? I was managing, I think like those are my favorite ones. And so I had this entrepreneurial bug. And when I started working with restaurants, I never worked in a restaurant before. Yeah. I wasn't one of those who grew up in the kitchen, like a lot of operators are. As I started working with restaurants from the tech side, what I found is that all of these restaurateurs were entrepreneurs too. Yeah. They had the passion, they wanted to build things. They were told they couldn't do something. And so I ended up falling in love with the space because most of these operators are entrepreneurs. A lot of us find ourselves in the space without expecting it.
Like when you look at how we both found it, right? You see a physical space, but you see the people. When I see a restaurant, I see the people, the different relationships, not just the guests, but how do we have an entrepreneur that's able to have a business and not, fight for break even? And then how do they support managers where they have a quality of life that's not opposite hours of friends and family through a service staff that's engaged or a heart of house that's engaged to create that guest experience? We're a human-to-human connection business. And
it's hospitality. It's all about being hospitable. Right?
Yeah.
The first restaurant we worked with was where I truly learned what hospitality was. I was cold walking into restaurants, trying to talk to their managers and try to be like, hey, we want to do this thing. We're going to take Grubhub orders. We're going to put it in your system. That's something you'd be interested in. You would think doing cold walk-ins unannounced, it would be fairly rude. But the reality is that they were incredibly hospitable, they were polite. The first restaurant that we ever signed, it was just an immediate, this would be really helpful, but here's what I need from you. And they fed me, right? Yep. They asked me, they wanted to know where I lived, they wanted to know where I grew up. And there was that first, even though I came in there, I'm trying to sell tech, they were trying to get to know who I was. And that was kind of an early light bulb for me to figure out, oh, this is all about people business. This is why they got into the space, was to be around people, provide an experience.
Yeah, and what I've learned being around you and watching what you do as a brand, it's curiosity questions. What I really appreciate is what my interpretation of how you built your brand is off a position of curiosity. What's the position you're in? What's maybe the pain point or the need or the want? And I think when people see that, right, a lot of times in life we're just trying to push our agendas, and I've done that a lot. But sometimes when we step back and we're genuinely curious about how do I help and support somebody else, great partnerships can happen, great opportunities can happen, but it's not common. So we'd interrupt the pattern just like we interrupt a service pattern by creating a great experience.
The biggest mistake I made in my first company that failed. The first one is that I wanted to build a tech company. And the second time around, I wanted to solve problems. Two very different things in that having conversations with customers and the second time around, they might tell me build this tech or build this feature, but then I would talk to them about what is the true problem? Why do you want that feature? What does that do for you? Well, couldn't you do that using this? Well, no, because of X, Y, and Z. And all of those deeper level questions, truly following the problems, really the biggest difference from the first company that didn't work to the second one where we've had some success.
What you're looking at is how do we solve a problem or a pain point rather than how do we have a solution that we think fits. So many of my clients come to me and say, we're looking at a technology solution. Just says, my question is, what problem is it solving? Because technology can be sexy, and we can buy, and there's great people selling it.
And I try really hard to make it sexy.
We can't see it on camera, but this cardboard kind of good shit right there.
Yeah.
But look at that. So I think, how do we make sure that we can connect it with what we're trying to do? So I talk to my clients, how do we align what we're going to integrate with the direction we want to go? It can be that simple, or we can have something that doesn't fit over time.
There's an operator that walked up today, and her first question was like, tell me about Charlie, like, what does it do? And my response was, well, what problems are you having with your restaurant? Because this conversation could be very quick. And I think that taking that problem orientation, trying to help the person as kind of the priority in your first attempt with their interaction, it builds trust, and that helps the space make more progress.
Yeah, and I think when we come to dealing with people is, how do we define value? It's a similar conversation for me. I got off a stage from a keynote the other day with a big company, and they said, how do you think it went? I said, it's not up to me. I think I did okay, but did we create effective change? Did you create effective change to get you the results you want and deserve for your operation? Now we've got success in a partnership. And there was a big VP, and he's like, no one's ever said that. I said, it really is the right answer.
I feel like I have that experience all the time, especially in speaking. Like, they're like, well, how do you think it went? And I was like, I don't know, do you think is the audience interested? Like, this helpful to them? I did one a couple days ago for these folks that are from Brazil. There's like 200 restaurant operators. They come here for the US for the restaurant show, and they walk around. So I spoke there, same thing, at the booth yesterday and today. They were coming up, and
there you go.
Hey, like, this was really helpful. You made it very simple for us to understand and like think about the technology stack of our restaurants. And to me, I was like, okay, now I know it went well.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Because they told the same thing with our customers. Like, you tell me if we're doing well.
How do we create, what's the goal, and how do we create momentum in the direction of our goals? And it's simple. If we don't have a defined goal, we don't know either side's successful. And unfortunately for us as suppliers, it can come back. Finding what does success look like? How do we help get there together?
I think the biggest mistake you've seen, some of the restaurateurs that you've worked with make.
My focus really is around the people side. Often what we have is hourly employees start to work up in an organization. Soon, say 10 years in, you have somebody running a $3 or $5 million restaurant that hasn't been supported in leadership development. So I think there's a difference between management and leadership. Whether you're the entrepreneur or you have a management team, depends on your scale. But there's a difference between functionally doing a job and then leading and inspiring others to do a job. It can be classed as a mistake or an opportunity, but if we want a scalable, sustainable business, is how do we set it up so we know how to lead our operations? Even our managers to lead our people, our entrepreneurs get out of the way of our people so they can do our job and we can play our position. I think it's the simplicity of really, how do I best serve my business and bring it value and stay in my lane and support my team?
I think that restaurants are a lot more similar to tech companies than most people. I've ran into that problem. When we're growing quickly, a lot of times you have someone who, they started in support, like taking calls, and then they work their way up, and all of a sudden they're a manager. They may know how to do the job, but they don't necessarily know how to lead the people. They may not have enough experience kind of laying out the foundation that managers have. Like, managing is very different than the individual contribution. We've run into that tons, and sometimes we've done it really well. And sometimes we have totally failed and let down, a potential leader at the business. We didn't make that investment. Like you said, as they kind of were growing up through climbing the ladder, we didn't invest in the leadership side of it as much as we should have.
And I think one of the questions, if this is landing for them, that I ask, and it's a Brene Brown question, what does support from me look like for you? So when a leader's leading with their people, when we're managing, we're directing and telling. When we're developing a team, sure, my biggest failure for my other company, I was in the way for about a decade. We were successful, we weren't scaling, and I had to say, what does support from me look like for you? And I had to get out of the role. I had to step out of the CEO role and put a CEO in place because I'm best to do this. But an emotional person running a profit-based company is not the best thing. But able to get out of my own way and say to my team, how do I best serve you? As a leader, we're at service of our people. It's not the other way around. All sounds good in a book, but really look at it from your businesses. I've got people that choose to, in a labor shortage, support my dream and vision. How do I support them? And if we can get, and it's fluid, you don't flick a light switch, it's a dimmer switch that goes up and down. How do we put ourselves in a position to continue to manage those relationships?
We talk a lot about return on time with operators, and I think it's really similar to kind of your experience. Just because you can do something doesn't mean that you should.
Absolutely.
And when you talk about, you call it kind of like getting out of your own way or getting out of your team's way. We talk with restaurateurs, like, sure, they could implement their own technology, but is that the best use of their time? Wouldn't they get a much higher return if they were working on the menu, if they were working on the customer experience, like if they were working on the things that come naturally to them and the reason that they got into the space? And it's the same thing, and it's how we approach technology with restaurants. That's why we have the done for you mindset.
100%.
Because it's more important, like, obviously we want to save you money and make you money, but But if we can give you back time, my theory is that that's actually the most valuable thing that we can give restaurants.
The most successful businesses have a simple focus. So I had a chance to work with Interbrew that got bought by InBev that took over Anheuser-Busch. And they focused on three things and built the most successful company of the last 20 years, $22 billion in profit. And to watch that team, it was just three things that they did every day relentlessly. But when we look at return on time as a coach, I'm trying to convince operators to do less, not more. So how do we do less? And I get them to rank what's our priority list, and they'll rank out 6, 12, 20 priorities. And they say, well, they're not all equally weighted. What has the best return on time? And it is a little bit of an arm wrestle at times. Well, we need to take advantage of all of this great opportunity. But if we do, we don't do it at an excellent level. So if we can rank it in priority order, so what has the return on impact, the return on time, and put our attention there as leaders, it creates space for clarity of where we put our effort, but then who should be our partners.
Yeah.
Because sometimes we got to let things go and let other partners like yourself get out of the way so we can do what matters most, which should be serving our people and serving our guests.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
That is dead on. No rebuttal. No, I think, one last question.
Yeah.
Let's say you could go back in time, over the past 10 years. What was your highest high point and what was your lowest low point?
I think highest high points when I decided to really focus on the people side. So just like any entrepreneur, I was distracted with opportunities. I had a chance to do some work at a program and identify what was the underserviced niche in the market that I could fill. I really deeply care when I wake up in the morning, and I'm in Chicago now away from my kids. So if I'm away from my kids, I want to impact people. When I got the clarity of my niche, and if this is a restaurant listing, who do we serve? Our staff and our guests get clarity around that. Things just accelerated so much, so quickly, but also so much joy in the work. It was a mind shift focus of just what mattered and what did I value. And at times in my career, I've chased the wrong things. At times in my career, I've been really successful and really unhappy. My best financial years were not my happiest, most fulfilled years. So when I found out what my focus was, I found balance at work, but also at home with my kids. And more importantly, I started to be happy with myself. And that was the shift. Lowest points, I've been through some challenges in my life, partnership changes. In the younger age, I grew up struggling. My family struggles with addiction and treating them and figuring out how do I serve my family and how do I also serve myself. Sometimes things are hard and that's okay. It's okay for things not to be okay. It's also okay for them to be okay. So my side is just sometimes it's got to get hard before it gets better and fight it through.
Thanks for coming on, man. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate it. Thanks, man.